Hello, welcome everyone to this new initiative by Chanakya Mandal called UPSC Swadhyay Mahotsav online streaming. The idea behind this initiative is that majority of the people studying for the civil services examination are going to be studying on their own. So one thing you have to understand is that your success or your failure at the civil services examination is almost solely up to you. Okay? That is why at Chanakya Mandal we stress upon this thing called Swadhyay, which is self-study. Okay? But that is why this idea came up, that as faculties we should probably show the students the way. So remember that you can be shown the way, but to walk the way is your responsibility. And the particular subject that I am here today to show you the way about is, of course, Indian economy. The topic for today is Indian economy. So I am going to share my thoughts with you about how you should go about studying this extremely important, something that can be a make or break subject in your mains examination as well as your prelims examination, considering the weightage that is given to this subject. I am going to share my thoughts about how you should go about studying this extremely vital subject. Yeah? So let's move on. Of course, any discussion should begin with a discussion of the syllabus. So the subject Indian economy comes under General Studies paper 3 in your mains examination. And if let us look at the actual wording of the syllabus, the various words that have been used. Of course, I have highlighted the most important points over here. The first one, of course, is Indian economy and issues related to planning, mobilization of resources, growth, development and employment. Okay? So the most important point over here is the word Indian economy. In your studies, you have to remember that the crux and the focus of your study has to be on the Indian economy. So in today's globalized world, whatever happens in the world affects India and Indian economy. And since India is such a large country with such a huge, which is either the 5th or the 3rd largest economy depending on which parameter you use, what India does also affects the world. Okay? But the most important part of your syllabus should be the Indian economy. So if you take a look around at the international economy and what is happening today, we see many important events. The most important one obviously is the US-China trade war. United States has pretty much designated China as a currency manipulator. Then another point we have is that the Venezuelan economy is going down the dumps, to put it mildly. Another important point is the economic reforms by Mohammed bin Salman in the country of Saudi Arabia. Now all of these either directly or tangentially are going to be important aspects in our studies, but they are international events. Okay? So they are not going to be at the crux of our study. Our study has to be exclusively focused on, not exclusively, but heavily focused on the study of the Indian economy. So that is the most important operative word over here. As we go detailed discussing into our syllabus, the next important point which stands out is the second point, that is government budgeting. Okay? In any country, there are two major institutions which decide the economic policy of that country, and in their own varying way they have an effect on the economy. These two policies are the monetary policy, which is decided by the Reserve Bank of India. And the second one, which this point is referring to, is fiscal policy, which is decided by the government. In our overall syllabus, these 2 points are absolutely and extremely crucial. If you look at if you analyze the past 5-6 years question papers for both the prelims and mains, you will realize that many of the questions have been asked either from monetary policy or from fiscal policy. So to understand monetary policy, you have to begin with an understanding of the concept of currency. You have to understand the historical evolution of how the concept of currency has evolved, how we came from barter exchange to the modern day paper standard, and of course the most points of Bitcoin and electronic payments. You also have to understand how the concept of banks evolved, and why do we have central banks, what is the concept of bank runs, and how does the Reserve Bank of India today regulate the monetary policy of our country. So that is monetary policy. Closely related to that is the word fiscal policy. Okay. The next 4 points, starting from major cropping patterns to the concept of land reform. So I am going to return to these points. So about 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 points, I am jumping over them right now. I am coming straight away to the third last point, that is effects of liberalization on the economy, changes in industrial policy and effects on industrial growth. The important word over here is liberalization. One very important point that we are going to cover later on is that how do you study current events when we study economy, and in that an important point that you have to note is that the LPG reforms of 1991. Economy is a very current events and a very dynamic oriented subject, but of those also probably the Indian economy has undergone a sea change after the liberalization, privatization and globalization reforms of 1991, and the syllabus is specifically telling us that after these reforms, what are the different changes that have occurred in the Indian economy. So the socialist times are not exactly behind past us, but we have now moved on to a more free market economy and a more liberalized economy, and it is the focus area as long as we are talking about the time period. Okay, see, strictly speaking, you can literally study the Indian economy from about past thousands of years. In the ancient and medieval world, we know that India was called as the golden sparrow of the world. We were a very rich and a very prosperous country, and the British colonial era ruined us. Okay, so you can study the ancient economic history, you can study the British period, and all of this actually does come under our study, but not to the equivalent depth of that you have to reach that after 1991. So actually from 1950s, that is after independence, to 1991, this is also an important period in the economy, but you don't have to go as much into the depth because the syllabus is explicitly telling us that the focus of our study should be the era of globalization, liberalization and privatization, that is the post 1991 era. Okay, then as we know, in any particular economy there are 3 major sectors of the economy. The first one is the agricultural sector, which I will get to. Second is the manufacturing sector, which is also sometimes called as the industrial sector, and that is the point that we are referring to here. Changes in industrial policy. Since independence, there have been many industrial policies, but we have to particularly focus upon the changes that were brought about in the Indian industrial sector after the era of liberalization. The remaining 2 points are infrastructure, that is energy, ports, roads and airways, but the important point here is infrastructure. Okay, in the Indian economy, or for that matter in any economy, the government of that economy plays an extremely vital role in developing the infrastructure of that country, and since we are going to appear for an examination to become government officers, we have to know what exactly is the entire infrastructure sector about. And the last one, and probably the most vague one within the syllabus, is the word investment models. Okay, now technically this word can be interpreted in multiple ways. Okay, investment is whenever any business spends money or anything. So are we going to study about how businesses spend money? The answer is no. This word is particularly referring to the concept of public private partnerships. That is, we have to study about how this is also acronymized as PPP. We have to study about how the government finances the infrastructure development of India. Okay, now one of the next points that I am going to get to you is you have to understand one thing, that you should not don't box yourself in when you are talking about the syllabus, because the syllabus for UPSC, as you have seen above in this entire area, it is very generally worded. Okay, I can literally pick up anything on the face of this earth and ask you a question either on your prelims and your mains, and you won't be able to point to me and say that you have asked something which is out of the syllabus. So when you are studying for UPSC, you should not compartmentalize yourself and box that, okay, I am just studying economy right now, I am just studying I am just studying polity right now, etc. Okay, for the sake of convenience, we do engage in something called as modules. So all courses at Chanakya Mandal, and probably majority of the coaching that you will get in any UPSC field that you will get to, the entire syllabus is classified into this concept of modules. Okay? Other examples of modules can be polity, that is, we study the constitution, history, geography, so on and so forth. But as long as we are talking about the module of economy today, I should tell you one thing, that at Chanakya Mandal we divide all the types of modules into two categories. One is called as a major module, the second is called as a minor module. If you read the syllabus carefully, there are certain subjects which are quite independent in themselves. Okay, but the scope of these subjects is such that when you are studying a major module, these subjects are like minor appendages to a major module. Okay, so the idea here is that when you are studying a major module, so here the major module that we are talking about is economy, and when we are studying economy, we are actually going to be studying two aspects of it. The first aspect is Indian economy, and if you look above over here, this particular portion that I skipped in between, that I told you I'll get back to you before, whatever is written above that, this section, and whatever is written below that, this section, this comes under the topic of Indian economy. And as I told you above over here, any particular economy has three sectors, and UPSC is specifically telling us that for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points out, that is almost half the syllabus for UPSC, we are almost exclusively focusing on the agricultural sector. So when sometimes we also, that is why at Chanakya Mandal we sometimes separate this into a minor module which is called as agronomy. You are studying the agricultural sector of India, because this is a major sector of India, though it contributes only anywhere between 15 to 20% to the GDP of India. More than 55% of the Indian population is directly dependent on agriculture as a primary source of their income. So we have to study this subject in its totality. And fortunately for us, UPSC has given us specific examples of what we are supposed to do when we are studying about the agricultural sector. What are we supposed to be focusing on? The first is major cropping patterns in various parts of the country. That is, within the agricultural sector, what are the different types of crops that are grown? Where are they grown? What are the different types of climate that is required for them, etc., etc., etc. Different types of irrigation and irrigation systems. So the major point over here is the word irrigation. Everything from huge dams like Bhakranangal Dam, Sardar Sarovar Dam, right down to a local level scheme like the Jalayukta Shivar Andolan of the government of Maharashtra, which is intended to construct check dams and that sort of thing at the village level. This is all intended to provide the farmer with an extremely critical input, that is water. And in this, under this topic, you are supposed to study I can put it in the most broadest terms, that how does India manage its water resources? Whatever water that India gets from, whether it be from the monsoon or whether it be because of the snow melt from the Himalayas, how do we manage it? Where do we use it? How much is used for industrial purposes? How much is used for drinking purposes? And the most important use is how much of the water is used for agriculture? How is it used? The next, marketing of agricultural produce. And this, in the most simple words, means that right from the farm to your plate, how does the food, whatever be the food, potatoes, onions, tomatoes, whatever you're talking about, how does it get from the farmer's field to your plate? And the supply chain. So in this point, what we are supposed to study is the agricultural supply chain and everything related to that. So in this comes the public distribution system, that is basically the ration card, how India provides its food subsidies, everything about the Food Corporation of India, the concept of agricultural produce marketing committees. All these topics, they will be covered in this particular three words, marketing of agricultural produce, everything about public distribution, Food Corporation of India, the entire concept of Food Security Act, etc., etc., etc. And issues related and constraints, whatever are the problems related to that. The next is e-technology in the aid of farmers. Every governmental intervention when it comes to using of technology on the agricultural sector, a recent good example is the concept of electronic national agricultural market. That is supposed to be a complement to it is supposed to be complementary to the agricultural produce marketing committees. This entire issue would be covered under e-technology. Another thing like e-chopal, etc., etc., etc. Next is animal rearing. This can be more easily described as allied sectors. Every farmer in India has some cattle. India has the largest cattle population in the world, and all the governmental interventions regarding the cattle industry of India. Okay, so for example, something you would study about this is in this point is the success of Amul, the governmental interventions called Operation Flood, their success thereon. Everything you have to study in this. In this particular topic. The next topic is food processing and related industries in India, scope, significance, location, upstream and downstream requirements, and again exactly this word over here used here is supply chain management. That in food processing, now we are talking about when the food gets from the farm to your plate, is there any value addition? Is there something additional being done to increase the quality? For example, irradiation, cold storages and everything related thereto. The next point is issues related to direct and indirect farm subsidies, minimum support prices and public distribution system. This point we have also already covered under marketing of agricultural produce. Everything related to governmental agricultural subsidies and the government intervention in the agricultural sector we have to study in this point. And probably the most difficult point to study in the entire syllabus is the concept of land reforms. Okay, so for this you have to go all the way back to the British era. You have to study the three main types of, first of all you need to understand the concept of land revenue. What is the concept of land taxation? You have to understand the three main systems of land revenue settlement that the British introduced in India, that is Rayatwari, permanent settlement and Mahalwari system. You have to understand the different problems that were created by then. And after independence, when the government set off to tackle these problems, whatever we did or couldn't do comes under the topic of land reforms. This entire effort we have to study in this topic. Okay. So here is a tabular format of how I have given the different categorizations of the syllabus. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 points out of the syllabus are related to the concept of Indian economy. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points are related to the agricultural sector. Later on we are going to see that of the almost 10 questions asked in the mains of 2018, 4 questions were asked from the agricultural sector itself. So I am time and again trying to emphasize the point to you that agricultural sector is an extremely important topic of study when it comes to the study for UPSC examinations. And this is the point that I was coming to earlier. Okay. UPSC syllabus is so generally worded. So in a way it is sort of deceptive. You should not, our entire educational system has put us into this habit of thinking in silos. Like for example, if you pick up a book for polity and you start to study polity, then we end up thinking that I am only studying polity right now. We do not think of the economy aspects of polity. We do not think about the historical perspective of polity, etc. When you are talking about UPSC, you should not study with this narrow vision. Don't keep yourself compartmentalized to thinking that if you are studying UPSC, you are only if you are studying economy, I beg your pardon, if you are studying economy, that I am only studying economy and I should not think about the international relations part of it, I should not think about the polity part of it. The skill that you have to learn is something called as an interdisciplinary approach. You have to think about as many possible angles of your study as you can, okay? Because UPSC syllabus, there is a lot of overlap, and the next example that I am going to give you is that itself. Our central topic is economy, but I can actually ask you questions from in such a way that you might be left scratching your head that is this a question in economy or is this a question in some other module. So I want to use economy as an example to show you how the syllabus for UPSC actually overlaps with pretty much every other module, okay? For example, if tomorrow I am to ask you a question on what is the poverty rate in India, what are the problems faced by women in India, and this concept of gender pay gap. So what is the average level of pay that a man receives and what is the average level of pay that a woman receives, and the difference between these two is called as gender pay gap, and there are different indices for that also. You may be left wondering, am I going to study poverty as a social issue or am I going to study it as an economic issue? And pretty much the answer is both. You have to study both aspects of it. Understand every social issue has an economic aspect and every economic issue has a social angle also. So that is why we call these issues as socio-economic problems. I'm using this as an example again to remind you not to keep yourself compartmentalized to thinking I am studying just for UPSC, socio-economic issues. Another is environment. Environment. If you are studying about the concepts like green GDP, climate finance, like are the developed countries going to give finance to adopt newer, cleaner, greener, yet more expensive technologies to the developing world? This is today become a major issue at the international climate negotiations. Where do you study this? We are talking about climate change, everything, so that comes under environment also, and we are talking about the concept of finance, which is basically in economy. So it is an overlap between environment and economy module also. What about international relations? Well, the concept of US-China trade war, the concept of currency manipulation. So currency manipulation is the practice of artificially keeping your exchange rates below the real value of the currency to encourage exports. Now everything about exports, everything about exchange rates, everything about related matters, we study under the concept of balance of payments, and that comes solely within economy. But you have to understand the international part of it also. How are Indian exchange rates determined? What is exactly China doing? What is currency manipulation? To understand currency manipulation, you have to understand what is the concept of exchange rates. So there is an overlap between international relations and economy also. Talking about history and economy, well, I've already covered the concept of land reforms. To understand the problems in the Indian agricultural sector, in the Indian land holding sector, we have to go back to the British era. So the problems of Indian agriculture are very closely related with the Indian freedom struggle, and you have to understand both to get a good idea of these problems. Polity, well, the entire concept of budget. See, on every 1st of February, when the finance minister stands up to deliver his budget speech, he's pretty much laying out the fiscal policy for the next year. The entire concept of goods and services tax budget, well, goods and services tax was introduced in India through a constitutional amendment. The entire procedure of budget, starting from the annual financial statement, the appropriation bill, etc., it is contained in the constitution. Constitution we study under polity, but the economic aspects of it you have to study under economy. Okay. And another example is, many people think that, okay, what the hell does science and technology have to do with something like economy? The two seem worlds apart. Okay. But today the world is facing an extremely important issue called Industry 4.0 and jobs. Industry 4.0 is pretty much the era of automation. Everyone today is worried about that the newer types of technologies, advances in robotics and artificial intelligence are going to steal human jobs. And if today everything that humans are doing is going to be done by robots, well, then what are humans going to do? This entire issue, so to understand robotics and artificial intelligence, you need to study about science and technology, and to understand the effect it may have on job creation, employment and unemployment rate, that comes under economy. Now, why did I spend so much time trying to explain this concept to you is something which falls exclusively in science and tech. It is a single dimensional question, or something which falls exclusively in this Venn diagram sort of here, here, or maybe even here. These would be unidimensional questions. That is, they have just one aspect to it. Okay, these are comparatively easier to understand and to answer. But take it from me, many of the questions that you are going to be asked in mains, okay, maybe not prelims since it is multiple choice type, are going to be in this category. Okay, and actually this figure doesn't quite reveal, because there may be something like a three-dimensional overlap between science and technology, between economy and something like international relations. This would be the concept of 5G technology. 5G technology, what does it mean? Comes under science and technology. The multiplier effect that 5G technology would have on the Indian economy comes in economy. And of course, international relations is the entire battle for 5G dominance that is today going on between United States and China. The entire controversy regarding the Android license for Huawei being taken away and the effect on India, whether India should allow Chinese companies in the Indian 5G market. The government is pretty close to, in the near future, it is going to auction the 5G spectrum. Whether Chinese companies should be allowed to purchase the spectrum, where should India get the equipment for installation of the 5G network? If this sort of a question is asked to you, it is a multi-dimensional question. And how many marks you would get for this question is solely going to depend not on how much you can write, quantity, but how many different aspects or angles of the same question can you examine? Are you aware of that? And that is why the word that I used here again is we get to the concept of interdisciplinary approach. Don't compartmentalize your mind into thinking that I am studying just economy. Try to think about as many different aspects of the same topic as you can think of. Try to think of, whenever you pick up any particular topic, try to think of what is the international relations angle of this? What is the social and societal aspect of this? What is the environmental impact of this, etc., etc., etc. The more angles of a particular, the more dimensions of a particular question that you can write, the more marks you are going to get. This is a very crucial skill that an aspirant for UPSC has to learn, and I emphasize this time and again because let's face it, we are not used to it. We are pretty much used to single dimensional study, and that is not going to help in our syllabus. The next question, the next topic that we are going to deal with is sources. Where do you study from? Okay. Of course, like in UPSC, any particular study should begin with NCERT. There are three main NCERTs that you have to read: 10th standard, 11th standard and 12th standard. Okay. Of this, I recommend, okay, that you go backward. Don't go standard wise. I'll get to the point why I'm saying this later on, but read this one first, that is 12th standard, Introduction to Microeconomics, then read Introduction to Macroeconomics, then read Indian Economic Development, then go on to read Understanding Economic Development for India. Go in a backward fashion. Why am I telling you this? I'll get to that in a moment. For now, just note that this should be your sequence of study. Any study for UPSC should always begin with a reading of the NCERTs for that particular topic. So in our study, you should know one thing, that NCERT comes first, and after that we go on to read something which I write short form as SRB. What is SRB? It is Standard Reference Book. What is a standard reference book? It is pretty much a book that has been written keeping in mind the requirements of UPSC civil service aspirants. Okay, so for example, if we take certain book, like let's say Indian Economy by Mishra Puri or Datta Sundaram, as I've mentioned over here before, below this. These are not standard reference book, because whatever has been written in these books, is it exclusive for UPSC preparation? No. Okay, these books are pretty heavy, they are huge. Okay, so I've mentioned over here that these books are overkill. You don't have to go that much into detail. If you do a simple cost benefit analysis, your cost is how much time are you spending reading these books, your benefit is how much of an increase in marks is it going to get you. These books, Mishra Puri, Datta Sundaram, Uma Kapila, etc., they are excellent books. Okay, I am not passing a negative comment about the quality of these books. I am speaking from the point of view of requirement of a UPSC aspirant. We don't need to go into this much detail. What is extremely important to read is the best and the most widely sold UPSC book here today is Indian Economy by Ramesh Singh by McGraw-Hill Education Publications. It's a very good book. It is written specifically for the UPSC examination. Basic economic concepts have been, and their application in the Indian economy are covered in one book. Okay. So after you read NCERT, you should pick up Ramesh Singh. You should finish that off. Then point number 3. So this 1, 2, 3 that I'm mentioning to you, should go in this sequence. Okay. Third thing you should pick up is the annual economic survey. Okay. Both of these are available at this particular the government run websites that I've mentioned over here, and an analysis of previous year question papers shows that UPSC generally asks questions directly from the economic survey or the budget, the annual budget that is presented. Okay, whatever data is given in the budget or economic survey, it is latest and up to date. That is why you should make it a point to read the economic survey and the budget. The point, this last point that I have mentioned over here is, you don't need to read the entire economic survey word for word. Okay, as long as we are talking about the budget, this particular website has a particular thing called budget highlights. It is a PDF document that is uploaded by the government of India on the website, which mentions the highlights for that particular budget. It is a very short read. You should go over it again and again and again. And as long as you are talking about the economic survey, you should read the executive summary. The economic survey is usually published in 2 volumes, volume 1 and volume 2. This is a recent practice. What volume 1 does is it lists major issues that are covered in the economy for that particular year, and volume 2 is the traditional type of economic survey that is mentioned in the the fiscal policy, the monetary policy, etc, 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 etc. So whenever you pick up a chapter of the economic survey, the economic survey is usually published as a 2-column page. Okay, but whenever any chapter begins, the first portion of the chapter, it is written as single column and it is written in italics. This is the executive summary of that particular chapter. You should always make it a point to thoroughly read the executive summary, and once you have done that, you don't need to go into the details. After that, you should regularly read newspapers. Now, newspapers, usually the practice is to recommend newspaper reading. The usual practice is to recommend the Hindu or Indian Express. These are good newspapers. They should be part of your primary reference material, but I personally recommend these 2 newspapers, Live Mint and Business Standard, and particularly their opinions and editorial section. Now, I agree that considering the workload, this is pretty heavy of a read. So you have to be selective in which particular opinion articles you read. But trust me, reading the good articles, they will help you understand the different issues that are facing the economy, what are the debates that are going on currently in the economic field, and after all, the questions that you are going to be asked are going to be from these issues and debates. So having an in-depth understanding of these issues is a very important advantage that you have on your side. So do make it a point to follow the newspapers. This point I've already covered, that the traditional books for the economy, that is Mishrapuri, Datta Sundaram, you don't have to go into that much detail. If you do find the time, if you do have the enthusiasm, you can obviously read them. Now this, see, of whatever I've written over here, NCERT, it's compulsory. You have to read that. Indian Economy by Ramesh Singh, it's also compulsory. Economic Survey and Budget, must read. Newspapers, should read. Not must, but it will be a very added advantage. Point number 5 and 5 onwards, 5 you don't have to read, okay, if you do find the time. In point number 6, I have listed a few important YouTube channels. They make learning fun. So the very famous channel called Crash Course, they have about a 50 session video on economics. You can go through that. Another channel called ACDC Leadership, he also has very good videos for UPSC. And of course, the most famous YouTube channel for UPSC preparation by this Ahmedabad based person called Mrunal Patel. You can also refer to that on YouTube. Another very good channel is this channel called Marginal Revolution University. Okay. These are just fun viewing channels. When you are having dinner, lunch, if you're bored with reading, if your eyes are hurting, you can just open this particular channel and you can view a few of their videos. It is fun and it helps in understanding of the topic also. And finally, last two important sources. India Yearbook. The yearbook is a pretty fat read. Okay, so you don't actually have to go into all the details. You can just cover these important chapters. And this is a very interesting website which I make it a point to regularly follow. Okay, indianeconomy.net. This website has quite a few advantages. It is absolutely UPSC oriented. If you view this website, the articles are written keeping in view someone who is preparing for UPSC. Whatever issues that are covered, they are up to date, and the data that is used is also latest. Something which is usually as an Achilles heel for a non-economics background person. If you have not done commerce or something like BA economics or BBA, if you're someone from a technical background, like say an engineer, such a person usually has difficult time understanding the complicated language of economics, and this website does a pretty good job of simplifying it for you. You don't have to go into too much detail. Okay, the language used is simple. Very small examples are used. Theory and application is covered in detail, and of course the best part is it's free. The next part in our syllabus, current events. If you ask me to point out two unique points about the UPSC syllabus, something which sets a UPSC aspirant apart from someone who is even pursuing PhD, I would list 2 points in such a way. UPSC syllabus is a generalist syllabus. The entire our entire formal education system, right from school years to if you go as high as doing a PhD, it is intended to make you a specialist. What is the difference between a specialist and a generalist? Well, a specialist studies a very small horizontal scope of subjects. He won't study too many subjects, but those few subjects that he studies it in extreme depth. So horizontal scope is less, but vertical depth is extremely high. But if you look at the UPSC syllabus, we don't have to go too much into the depth of any particular topic, but we have to study a hell of a lot many topics. So for UPSC, the vertical depth is not very deep, but the horizontal scope of the syllabus is very vast. This is a unique point of UPSC syllabus which you have to understand. And the second unique point is the relevance of current events. No other examination from our schooling years to any other competitive examination will have so much of an emphasis on understanding what is going on around the world, even in India, as UPSC examination. The UPSC examination, the syllabus for any particular topic can be classified into these two categories. Every syllabus has certain portion which is static. It doesn't change. Okay, as long as we are talking about economy, all the concepts of economics, like what is macroeconomics, microeconomics, what is macroeconomics, within microeconomics the concept of law of demand and supply, what is all that about, what is GDP, what is monetary policy, what is repo rate. These concepts are not going to change, they are static. You have to study those concepts also, but you have to do something which a person who is at 11th 12th commerce level, or someone who is doing BA economics, even BBA, sometimes even a PhD in economics doesn't have to do. You have to keep your knowledge of UPSC absolutely up to date. You should know what has been done yesterday. Okay? So remember this formula. When you are talking about the syllabus, see what a mistake which many people do is that they think that when I complete the UPSC syllabus, if you pick up the 4 points that I have mentioned earlier, if you pick up NCERT and if you pick up Ramesh Singh, if you finish reading that, many students make the mistake of thinking that my syllabus for economy is complete. Your syllabus for economy is less than half complete. If you have completed the concepts, your static portion is complete, but now you have to build upon that base. You have to update your knowledge, and that is why studying the economic survey, that is why studying the budget, that is why studying the newspapers becomes important. So remember this formula. Our entire syllabus is divided into static content, that is something which does not change, and dynamic content. So static plus dynamic equals the syllabus for any particular topic. Now one thing you should remember is that we are of the very different type of modules that we study for in UPSC. The relative weightage of static and dynamic, it varies to a certain extent. Okay, this figure will show you, will make this picture clearer. What I have written over here in these 3 points is that there are certain subjects for which the dynamic portion of the syllabus is extremely important. Now these figures like 80% dynamic, 20% static, the words are not exact, but you should remember there are certain modules for which the type of questions that you are going to be asked are going to be pretty heavily current events related. So you should make it a point to read about the current events for these points. So if you were to ask me to make a vertical rank of relative weightage of current events, rank 1 would probably be a tie between these two topics, economy and international relations. If you analyze the prelims and mains question papers for the past few years, you will realize that almost exclusively questions that are asked for economy and international relations are pretty much based on current events. There is going to be relatively very minor weightage for the conceptual part of it. A few questions in prelims may be asked on economic concepts. Then there are certain Then there are topics like polity, environment and geography, social issues, society, where it is pretty even. Okay. For example, if we are talking about social issues or society, when we are talking about society, we are talking about the theoretical aspect of it. What is multiculturalism in India? What are the issues related to diversity? What is unity in diversity? Concepts like regionalism, etc., etc., etc. That the theoretical part comes in society. Social issues is going to be pretty much current events, which is built upon the theoretical aspect which you have covered in society. It can range anything like recent current events, like Section 377 has been decriminalized. So you may be asked a question regarding the rights of the LGBTQ community in light of the recent judgment of the Supreme Court decriminalizing consensual same sex. So that would be social issues, but it is still pretty much 50-50. Okay, and there are certain topics where the weightage for static content is going to be pretty heavy. The subjects are art and culture and history, which is freedom struggle. So these are not, obviously you will understand that history is something which has already occurred in the past. How is it ever going to change? Okay? So since we are talking about economy, remember that the dynamic portion of our syllabus is pretty major. Of the two components over here, we have 80% for dynamic, 20% for current. The point that I am trying to make here is be absolutely certain to be up to date with your current events. I have taken two examples over here. These are two questions that were asked in mains examination of 2018. Okay. The first question is, with growing energy needs, should India keep on expanding its nuclear energy program? Discuss the facts and fears associated with nuclear energy. Now, a very important point of overlap is considered over here also. Okay. When you are writing this question, you should first of all make it a point to answer basically what is nuclear energy, how does a nuclear reactor work. So your introductory sentence can be something like a nuclear energy reactor uses fission reaction to generate steam, and the steam generates the electricity. Okay. One sentence you are telling the examiner basically how a nuclear reactor works. Then the next point is discuss the facts. Okay, the facts are of the total energy composition. How does India generate majority of its energy? From coal energy, hydroelectric energy, solar energy, wind energy, and nuclear energy is another important subcomponent. So this statistic you are going to find in the economy aspect of it. You should know that today India generates majority of its energy using thermal power plants, that is coal. Why are we doing this? The answer is simple: coal is cheap. These particular points would be the facts, and the important point is, should we go in for nuclear energy? It's both yes and no. Yes, because we need to go in for more renewable, non-polluting sources of energy, and no, because of the different types of fears that are associated with nuclear energy. The most important 2-3 fears which you can write is, the first one is radiation. What happens if something like Fukushima or Chernobyl happens in India? You never know. What if there is a nuclear meltdown? Second is terrorism. What if the radioactive material falls in the hands of terrorists? What if they make a dirty bomb? And the most important fear associated with nuclear energy is, what do you do with the nuclear waste? How do you store it? You can't just dump it into the ocean. You can't put it in. It is radioactive. It is still giving out harmful radiation. How do you store nuclear energy? Okay. So this brings out an aspect of overlapping nature of the questions that you are going to be asked. This question is sort of like an overlap between environment, because we need renewable energy, science and technology, because you need to understand how does a nuclear reactor work, and economy, because we are talking about energy. If you remember the part about syllabus that I covered earlier, one of the subpoints under the word infrastructure was the word energy. Where does India get its energy from? So when you are writing this answer, you need to write the entire aspects of it. And actually a minor point, that since I mentioned terrorism, we might as well add internal security as an overlapping feature to this answer also. So I hope you are getting my point. The question is 1. Okay. Now when you read this question, don't ask yourself Okay, is this an economy question? Is this a science and tech question? Is this a environment question? The basic answer is all of the above. Whatever different angle of this question that you can think of, write it. Don't, of course, and as long as it is the answer to the question that you have been asked. And the second, how would the recent phenomenon of protectionism and currency manipulation affect world trade, affect macroeconomic stability of India? So this is again international relations and economy overlapping with one another. But another important point here you should know is, why has this question been asked? This particular, why has it been asked? The answer is mains of 2018, past 2-3 years. The concept of a trade war, the concept of rising protectionism, of currency manipulation, what China is doing, what US is accusing China of doing, it has been doing the rounds. Okay, maybe this question would not have been asked in, let's say, the 2014 or the 2015 mains, because it is particularly after the election of Donald Trump that he has taken a very strong stance against China. Barack Obama didn't do that. Okay, so maybe the likelihood of this question being asked before Trump becomes the president of USA would have been less. This question was asked because these points have been doing the rounds in the newspapers, and that is why most important point, this last highlighted point that I keep coming back to, your knowledge must be absolutely and utterly up to date. That is why for I already told you that for UPSC, studying current events is particularly important, and when it comes to current events, we study, see, an important problem that a UPSC aspirant faces when it comes to studying current events is that when the news reaches us, it doesn't reach us in a very organized form. Okay, the newspapers just print the news as and when it happens, but when we are going to study the news, we need to take a comprehensive view of the event that has happened. That is why a major component of UPSC study is studying the being able to classify the current events that you are going to study. And that is why, as long as we are on this point, I thought it appropriate that I should share with you my system of classification of current events. And the word that I use over here is that I classify current events at 4 levels. So any particular event that you are going to write, you should go 4 levels deep into that topic. Now, if you are maintaining your current events notes in soft copy format, it's pretty good. This basically means that if you are using a software like OneNote or Evernote, or you can actually even do this in MS Word, your highest level of classification should be your modules. If you're doing this in hard copy format, well then you should make 8 separate folders, and this circle that I have mentioned over here are the main modules within which your UPSC syllabus can be divided. And see, one important point to remember, my suggestion to you is that don't classify your current events in a notebook, because later on you will realize that you have to do a lot of additions and deletions into your current events notes, and you should have that flexibility. That is why I always recommend that you should classify your current events into folders with separate pages, so that you can remove and rewrite the pages as and when you please. You can insert something new in between. A notebook does not offer you this flexibility. So all the major modules that we cover in our syllabus, these are going to be the first level of classification of your current events that you should take care of. Now let us, since we are talking about economy, if you make 8 major notebooks, the subcategories within each of these notebooks is going to be different, because the scope of each syllabus is different. So let us take the example of economy. Let us imagine I have a folder in front of me. There are 8 folders. These are the highest levels of classification for my study. I open the economy notebook. That brings us to the second level of organization for level 2 for our syllabus, which is index. Now the details I have given over here are for UPSC, for the module of economy, but you should understand that when you are making subcategories within a particular notebook, the guiding principle for the second level of your organization should be the index or syllabus of your standard reference book. So you can pretty much pick up Ramesh Singh, or you can even refer to the NCERT syllabus, and you should make subcategories for those particular topics. Now in your economy notebook, your first subcategory should be everything related to microeconomics. So that would be the law of demand and supply, the concept of price control, price floor, price ceiling, the concept of a subsidy, and everything current events related to that. So everything about international oil prices, why have they been going up and down? This can be considered from the point of view of microeconomics, okay? But microeconomics is a pretty small part of our syllabus, so this will probably be a thin portion of your syllabus. Then the next is GDP, national income accounting. Okay, everything related, what is GDP, what is NDP, what is GDP at factor cost, market prices. Then the most important is what are the recent trends in Indian GDP. For example, for the past few months, at the end of August, we received a very shocking news that the growth rate of the Indian economy, of the Indian GDP, has reached a 6-quarter low of 5%. Why is this happening? Is this a structural slowdown? Is this a cyclical slowdown? Are we going to all these type of problems would be classified within the subcategory of GDP, and related to that is the concept of business cycle, the peaks, the booms and busts, and everything related to that. Then one important point in our syllabus is the concept of inclusive growth, that is economic growth versus economic development. Should you just increase the growth of your economy? The size of the economy and the growth rate of the economy is measured by using terminologies such as GDP, but the concept of development, Human Development Index, gross national happiness, etc., these sort of concepts, and most importantly the different governmental interventions for betterment of the quality of life. These would be the correct terminology for that is welfare economics. What is the poverty rate of India? What are the different government schemes for uplifting of the poor, etc., etc., etc. Point number 5 is inflation, monetary policy, finance, that is banking and non-banking. These are pretty self-explanatory. What are the recent trends in inflation? What are the causes of inflation? Is it cost push? Is it demand pull? What are the real interest rates in India? What is the recent monetary policy? What is the recent repo rate? Etc, 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 etc. Then your next subcategory should be, point number 8 should be public finance. That is basically fiscal policy. Okay, everything related to government budgeting. What is the tax to GDP ratio? What is the current fiscal deficit? What is the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act? What are the different changes being considered in the Indian taxation structure? What is GST? What is the direct taxes code that is being discussed right now? What is this concept of Google tax? What is the concept of minimum alternative tax? What are the changes being made to the corporate tax rate, which is being sought to be reduced? All these points would come in the concept of public finance. Another word for public finance, if you want to change this heading, is you can write fiscal policy also. Okay. Number 9 would be external sector, which is basically the concept of balance of payment. Under balance of payment, the two most important categories would be the current account and the capital account. All the issues related to current account. So what is India's trade in goods? What does India export? Who does India trade with? What does India import? Where does India import it from? Who are India's biggest trading partners? What is the overall trade balance, which is almost always in the negative? What is India's trade in services? What is the concept of remittances? Why is India the highest remittance receiver in the world? And overall, what is the current account balance? Almost every time our current account has always been in deficit. So this word current account deficit, it is doing the rounds, and everything related to that comes in the current external sector. Then capital account. What are the different subcategories of capital account? What is the concept of foreign direct investment? What is the concept of foreign portfolio investment? What are the trends in FDI? Recently the government has liberalized the FDI norms. So why has this been done, etc. All of this comes under external sector. Point number 10. An overview of what is going on in the world, that is international. Okay. Now remember the difference between external sector. External sector, we are exclusively talking about the concept of balance of payments. When we are talking about the international sector, we are basically talking about what is the World Trade Organization, what is the International Monetary Fund, what are the current issues that are going on within the World Trade Organization. So recent issues that the United States is hell-bent on destroying the dispute settlement body of the World Trade Organization. The existence of the World Trade Organization itself today faces a threat. It has critics are saying that it is going to become a defunct organization pretty soon. All these challenges come under the external sector. Since this point number 11 is specifically mentioned in our syllabus, we make a separate section for it, but the reality is that especially after 2017, that is after the 12th 5-year plan ended, there is not going to be pretty much any new sector in this particular subcategory, but basically you have to get an overview of everything from the 1st to the 12th 5-year plan, which ended in the year 2017. After that, a current event in this can be that the distinction between plan and non-plan expenditure has been abolished. Now, why has it been abolished? That can be considered in this point. Point number 12. Point number 12, 13 and 14. These are basically the three important sectors of the Indian economy. Now, I want to draw your particular attention to this particular chapter, agriculture or primary sector, because trust me, if your current events notebook is, or not notebook, but your this file is about 100 pages thick, I would go as far as to say that 50 pages of those 100 would almost be exclusively the agricultural sector. Because as we have covered earlier in this video, a major chunk, 5 points out of the 10 points in the bullet points of the syllabus were related to the agricultural sector. We have the word changes in industrial policy has also been mentioned in the syllabus. That is why this point also becomes important. This is the only word which has not been specifically mentioned in the syllabus. But since this is such a huge sector of the Indian economy which contributes more than 50% to the GDP, it is pretty obvious that we have to have at least a basic overview of what is the services sector of India. Okay. And finally, the particular point mentioned in the syllabus is infrastructure. You have to, it is a sort of separate sector in the Indian economy. What is the current events that have been going on in infrastructure development for India? So again, to revise, point number 1, you should have 8 notebooks within the, now since we are talking about economy, I have not gone into the details of the other topics, but the guiding principle for level 2 is that it should be an index. The index or the syllabus should be the classifying points for point number 2. Okay. Now point number 3 and 4, level 3 and level 4 are the trickiest and the most important to understand. To understand level 3, you have to remember this particular principle. One particular issue within the headline. So issue is the word. As I was discussing the detailed syllabus before, I was mentioning many current events. They were just flowing out of my mouth. But whatever points I mentioned when discussing level 2, each of those points would be a separate issue. For example, level 1, your file regarding economy. Within level 1, point number, we go to the heading of monetary policy, since we are now going to be talking about currently the repo rate. Now actually within monetary policy, you are going to have many issues. Okay. First of all, within monetary policy, you have quantitative tools, you have qualitative tools. Within quantitative tools, you have the policy rates, repo rate, bank rate, etc. You have the concept of open market operations, you have the concept of reserve ratios, that is CRR, SLR. Each of these points should have a separate heading. But the particular example that I am talking about here is repo rate. Okay, that should be your level 3. Okay. And level 4, the principle for level 4 is static content plus dynamic content. For example, if we are taking the concept of repo rate, so understand how deep we have reached into this point so far. Your level 1 is your economics notebook. Within the economics notebook, you have gone into the subcategory of monetary policy. Within monetary policy, you have created a level 3 heading called repo rate, and everything related to repo rate will come under the heading of repo rate. But beneath repo rate, so if you have prepared like a separate page for it, the heading in bold should be written as repo rate. And below the heading of repo rate, the first portion, the first page of repo rate should be the static content. That is the portion which is not going to change. Basically, your concepts. Okay, what is repo rate? Okay, what is a repurchase agreement? What is the difference between repo rate and bank rate? What is the difference between repo rate and reverse repo rate? So the conceptual clarity, because understand one thing, your current events are going to be built upon your understanding of the basic concepts. If your basic concepts are not clear, no matter how much time you spend on current events, it is not going to be sufficient. Okay, you are not going to understand it. So the way to approach current events is that whenever you read something in the newspaper, you should work backwards. You should understand the basic economic concept behind that, and then you should understand what is the latest point that has happened. And then once you, so why am I telling you that below repo rate you should first make the concept clear? The answer is that if tomorrow you read something about the repo rate, you add it to your current events notes. While you are doing that, you would have done a quick refresh of the conceptual part. Okay. For example, as long as we are talking about repo rate, the recent current event that has happened is that since February of 2019 till about August, September of 2019, the Reserve Bank of India has cut the repo rate by 110 basis points, which is about 1.1%. Now this is the current event. If you don't understand what is repo rate, how does the RBI set the repo rate, if you don't understand the concept of repo rate, you are not going to understand what is the significance of this particular event. Now, the latest part, that is, what is the latest repo rate? Now, this particular note that as of August 2019, Reserve Bank of India has cut the repo rate by 110 basis points. These are basically like just 2 or 3 lines. It's a tidbit. But to understand the significance of this tidbit, you have to prepare the note for an analytical portion also. So the tidbits you can get from the news, the analysis you have to get from the opinions and editorials that you have to write. Okay. So I hope this 4-level classification of current events has helped you, and best of luck for your study. Thank you. See you again.